Welcome back in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again alongside Manny Lagos and special guest, and the guy who the show is named after, Jon Marthaler. It's his podcast after all. Boys, we finally have a game to actually preview. The MLS regular season opens up on Saturday with, now after some schedule changings last minute, Minnesota United and LAFC. How are we doing on this fine Thursday morning, Manny Lagos?
Yeah, I mean, aside from excited to be part of Jon Marthaler's journey here at his podcast.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Loons Marthcast.
Yes, there we go. Let's go. My brain goes, I'm just excited. You know, it's surreal to think about the journey of MLS. I've been using the word journey a lot, by the way. So I use it a ton. It's because it's when I'm excited about something. And the journey of MLS and this offseason and the fact that teams in this league, you know, I know we're gonna just go on all these different tangents because there's so many storylines in the league right now. The explosion of rosters, the explosion of this kind of new money, the explosion of just, I think, teams finding more of their own individual identity. I couldn't be more excited for the start of the season. And again, I know it's coming fast and furious. We even got a taste of it with the CONCACAF Champions League. But my big thing this morning was just like, I cannot believe it starts this weekend and how pumped I am about all of it. I mean, you know, obviously MNUFC, we're excited and we got a great first opponent away, but just in general, it is a really exciting kickoff to the year coming up here. And Minnesota United gets the first game of the season in the league, which is pretty cool.
I'm looking forward to that. John, how are we doing with MLS is back 2 days away from now?
You know, it's funny because it feels like it's been an underrated offseason for upheaval. You know what I mean? Like, I was delighted to point out early last season that there was a time when the top three MVP candidates in the league that weren't Lionel Messi were Chicho, Cucho, and Lucho. And now we start this season, Cucho's in Spain, Chicho is in San Jose, not Real Salt Lake, and Lucho's in Dallas and not Cincinnati. All of them have moved. And I also was researching, you know, I was just looking at the list of MLS head coaches and looking at the seniority, how long they've been in the job. Eric Ramsey, who just finished his first preseason as Minnesota United coach, is now 17th on the list of the longest tenured MLS head coaches. It's in less than 365 days. He's almost already in the top half. So there's a lot of changes going on, a lot of new players, and it's hard to keep track of, It's especially surprising given that the last game of last season was like 3 weeks ago. So the amount that's been packed into that short time is amazing.
It really
is. John, is there any way you can get a new names of the, like, you got Bamba coming into the league? You know,
true.
Exciting one, right?
I think we need more one-word nicknames that are confusing to people who don't know what's going on. Because it's not, you know, Lucho, okay, his name is Luciano, but some of them, like Chicho, not obvious that that's going to be his name. I think it's like a password for MLS fans just to know who the heck you're talking about when you say Chicho.
That's the MLS sickos password. Is Chicho.
That's right.
Yeah, because he's played in a couple different locations and will probably score bags of goals in San Jose, just like he did in LAFC and Real Salt Lake.
Chicho and enter.
Plenty to discuss on the episode today. We'll preview the game coming up on Saturday against LAFC in Los Angeles. But first, I want to get to just kind of the CONCACAF Champions Cup wrap-up that we saw, the first leg of it for the MLS squads these past couple days. And John, I know the talking point for you is Olivier Giroud's frozen beard after 60 minutes in Colorado on Tuesday night. What did we think of what we saw out of LAFC in the freezing cold? And as I asked Manny before the show, Miami in the freezing cold in Kansas City last night.
It is, I will say, it is very, very funny to me that the 1st February after MLS started talking about, oh, maybe let's flip the schedule and we'll play more winter games. 2 of the worst, most icy games in the history of the league, not MLS games, but between MLS teams. It was just like the universe coming together and being like, no, Not a good idea. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to play an ice bowl on the grayest field imaginable. The funny thing was Seattle was playing in Guatemala at the same time as Miami was playing in Kansas City. And just you would look at the Kansas City game and it's just the grayest field imaginable. And then you'd look at the game that's being played in Guatemala and it was almost like hurting your eyes. The field was so green and normal. Like, it's too bright. I need to go back to this black and white game that's happening over here between Miami and Kansas
resonates
City.
even more with Minnesotans because we're like, guys, do you understand what happens in February? Like, it was a nice, like for us, it was like, oh yeah, this is what happens in this month. It's not a
This week was the perfect example. You look at it and you're like, well, the average high is 28. You can play when it's 28. Yeah, but sometimes the high is -4. And it's bad. It's bad when it's that cold.
Yeah, and the real feel is like -12, and your goalkeepers have to keep moving to keep their toes from losing feeling in the middle of it. Yeah,
it's actual frostbite is a problem.
Yeah,
that's not a good time to be playing games.
No, I think that your question's tough about Giroud because I think we want to talk about the league and the East and the West and the team, John. And you bring up Giroud, and our brain's going to go to the weekend. I mean, our brain's going to go to this guy scored 2 goals in 20 games, which is part of the problem, I think, for LAFC's kind of identity right now. It also kind of like I put on my Minnesota United hat. At some point, he's got to break out. Like this is a guy who dominated European soccer in big games, big goals, and my brain cannot fathom. Like for the last 6 months, he arguably you can talk about him in a way that like he is not making them better, but is now created a new identity, which is they don't look as strong as they ever have since they've been in MLS.
Well, it feels like in reading up on LAFC over the past couple of weeks, with all their transfers out and the moves that they have made in the offseason, they've significantly moved towards a transition offense to try and get the ball into Denny Bouanga's feet on the run, which, yeah, that'll work, but that'll work for Bouanga. But does that really work for Giroud, who's 37, 38 years old? At this point, probably doesn't have the legs under him to play that kind of transition attacking football. They need the possession that they were so good at last year. Is this really the best setup for Giroud? I know that was a question last year, and it feels like after what we saw on Tuesday, that's going to be the same question early on this season. Is this really the best way to set up with Giroud at the top of that attack?
Yeah, I mean, are we going to the game now, Jonathan? Are we going to the rest of the week? Because I can go into the game this weekend and talk about it, but
we can just still talk about Giroud and LAFC, and then we can get to the rest of the LAFC conversation later when we.
I mean, but you could also make an argument Bouanga, along with Messi, maybe are the 2 most dangerous players in the league, and so is that on LAFC or is that on Giroud to kind of navigate the fact that he's played a lot of great environments, scored a lot of big goals, and somehow he has not been very impactful for them. At all. So I'm not putting it all on Giroud. I definitely think the style is there, but ultimately I'm more nervous about the weekend again, just because at some point, this is a guy who was beast mode for decades in Europe. I don't care how old you are. If you're going north of 20 plus games with so few goals and impact, either you're going to break out soon or you are MLS is not the right league for you.
Yeah. Certainly the question has to be asked there. Should the rest of the Western Conference, John, be concerned that Paul Arriola and Jesus Ferreira are already scoring goals 3 minutes into their debut with Seattle Sounders?
You look at Seattle and you go, how did they manage to reassemble the entire 2019 MLS All-Star team on one team? It shouldn't be possible. And yet you look at they got Ariel. Oh, Albert Rusnak is there. I forgot. Oh yeah. João Paulo is the 5th guy off the bench for Seattle. It's annoying. It's extremely annoying to look at that team and go, right. They have a lot of quality coming from all over with that team. And it's not like LA where the league makes a new roster rule to accommodate whatever they want to do. They just take the actual roster rules and are like, yeah, we've signed 14 good players somehow and try to do something about it.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to play them this season, Manny.
Yeah, my brain goes to, as we look at our roster of, I don't know, 19-ish foreigners, I could be right around there. I'm sure I'm plus or minus a couple. But for the old school people out there, 1 year in NASL, there was a Team America in the league.
This is real old school.
This is real old school. Yeah, I think Seattle's Team America this year. I think they feel like Team America. but with some pretty good, national team, former national team, current national team players or national B team players. I'm fascinated. It's going to be an interesting one to see if they can continue to find ways to compete at the top of the West with this roster. We'll see. We'll see.
It'll certainly be interesting. Another interesting note, as we mentioned Lucho earlier, he was part of a trio of moves over the past couple days. Lucho moving to Dallas finally after a long exaggerated spell of rumors there of him leaving Cincinnati. Evander going from Portland to Cincinnati, and then Portland taking that money and signing David DaCosta. Some massive moves just a couple days before the season starts, Manny. What do you make of all these and how they impact those three teams that made those moves?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that the audience kind of know, and actually this is something I've been working on with the league for 4 or 5 years in various roles, the unleashing of this new internal cash.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's an example of clubs trying to find value all over the world and how hard it is to find value and then be certain about the value you're finding, that it's a good investment. And this ability now to buy players within the league as opposed to just trade GAM or trade assets, player assets, just has exploded within 2 months. You've got Evander 12 million, Acosta 6 million, Joveljic 4 million, McGlynn, I'm sorry, not McGlynn. McGlynn 2 million. It's just, it's worked out better than I even imagined it would in terms of right away. Teams are ready to invest internally versus going externally and kind of taking risks. So unbelievable. It just is part of this new wave, I think. And you've got league MVP candidates 2 years ago and last year that are now on new teams.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, John, with teams now just being able to swap cash instead of, as Manny's pointed out, swapping GAM or draft picks or other players. I like this for the league. We talked about it last week, Manny. I like that this is now a route for teams to acquire players because we've talked about in the past, John, how difficult it is to find players to just hit the ground running in MLS because it is such a different league from elsewhere, that being able to do that within MLS is going to be a game changer in the transfer market for these teams.
Yeah, it's been amazing to watch. It wasn't that long ago, was it? I can't remember whether it was Kevin Molino going to Orlando or coming to Minnesota, where it was like $600,000 in GAM, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so much fake money to be traded for a player." And now they started this interleague cash thing, and the record for that has been smashed like 4 times in 4 days. It went from like 500,000 to 2 million to 4 million to 12 million already for Evander going to Cincinnati. Just like, wow, there was some pent up demand for this for sure.
Yeah, and I think as we go, we're going to go into MNUFC, but my brain obviously goes there right away. I think when you look at our roster where we are and the flexibility going into the summer window, once again, like last year, and then now you add that we can go into the external global market or to improve our roster this summer with our flexibility, a couple young DPs. We can do this internally in ways that we've never imagined before. So to me, if you're somebody who's building a roster or trying to think about how to get better throughout the year, I even think this summer window, we're going to see a lot of this usage of this new kind of league cash.
Are we going to sort of see what we see in the rest of American sports where as we get towards the end of that second transfer window coming up later this summer, are we going to start to see the buyers and sellers try and make their moves where teams that aren't having a good season, I know soccer's a little bit different in how they operate their rosters and everything, but are we going to start to see, do you think, where the teams that are at the bottom of the league in the middle of the summer, knowing that their season's kind of lost at that point, are they going to look to some of these other teams that are trying to compete or on the fringes of competing and say, hey, we've got this player, you want to throw us some cash? Here he is. You think that happens, John, or is it still yet to be seen?
I'll tell you what I want to happen. And what I want to happen is for somebody to totally give up by the end of April, by the end of the primary transfer window, and have a fire sale in mid-April. Just somebody goes out, loses 4 of their first 6 games and says, forget it, we're done. Everybody's for sale. We're just having a fire sale basically before the season's even started. That's what I want to happen.
You can't give away Toronto's game plan already.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Toronto, if anyone is interested in Lorenzo Insigne, give Toronto a call. You don't have to be a soccer team. If you're just a company that's looking for somebody, they will sell him to you. No problem.
only about
That,
15 to $20 million, so no
Yeah,
problem.
it's fine.
Yeah.
He's good. He's a world-class athlete. He's good for a lot of things. Light filing, lifting up to 40 pounds. There's a lot you can do with that guy.
except for sell him, apparently, get him to move out of your
Oh
club.
no, you can't sell him to another country. He's not going
Yeah,
to do that. But
no,
as long as he stays in Toronto, it'll be fine. Could the Maple Leafs use him? I don't know. We'll see.
possibly. Team Canada, maybe they're in action tonight. They could
That's right.
possibly use him.
Here you
Oh,
go.
look at that.
So, can he fight one of the Chakuk brothers?
Other, as we discussed transfers, any other transfers? I know Manny and I talked a bunch about them last week, but any other transfers that kind of hit you and surprised you? I know Nico Ladero ending up in Houston over the past couple days kind of took me by surprise, leaving Orlando and ending up in Houston. What other transfers that maybe we didn't talk about last week, Manny, have taken you by surprise and that you're excited to see this season and how they play out?
Well, I think in the West, we have to acknowledge Austin has spent north of $25 million, particularly on two players, Uzuni and Vasquez. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And so I think there's a lot of high expectation now that Austin has improved their roster. We'll see. But those are two pretty big pieces, I think, in the West. Obviously, the new team, San Diego, throwing a lot at Chucky and a couple other players. I think that's really an interesting one. In the East, I kind of mentioned Bamba. I think that's a great name. And I think Atlanta is the team of the transfer window in the East for me with Lath and Almiron. Another probably north of 35 million they probably spent on those two. So added with the Moranchuk, they're probably one of the favorites down the East because of that their business they've done. So a lot of exciting stuff. Like I said, I probably missed a few, but those are probably the big ones that come to mind.
John?
You know, the team that I'm really watching this year is San Jose, just because they're like, what was that action movie that had Sylvester Stallone, all the action stars in it? I've forgotten the name of it, but
The
that's basically
Expendables.
The Expendables. San Jose is
They
doing
made like
the
four of them
Expendables this year. The San Jose Expendables, where they're just taking Bruce Arena and all these guys that are like, maybe they're washed up, and Bruce Arena's out there going, well, yeah, but what if they're not? I'm fascinated to see what happens with the Quakes this year.
Yeah, I was at
bringing over
preseason
half
and
the.
I was at preseason and Chicago was playing San Jose, and my brain went to like we got two former national team coaches going against each other, which I thought was pretty cool and pretty exciting. I mean, both those organizations are really, going all in different ways, trying to invest and kind of get out of this kind of 5 to 7 year kind of spell that they've been in a little bit. And San Jose is obviously in the West. It's a team we're going to play and compete against quite a bit. It'll be fascinating to see how that project goes. And again, Bruce has done this before, so I think there's a lot of us that think he might be able to kind of turn it around in a different way than a lot of teams have. So we'll see. But very, very intriguing. Very intriguing.
At Target, we're ready to cheer with the hometown fans and gear you up for an epic season. Whether watching from the stands or your living room, score big on game day with everything you need for the win. We're here to be your home field advantage at Target and Target.com.
Certainly. I think I agree there. San Jose with what they're doing with Bruce Arena, bringing in half of the New England Revolution squad that he brought in when he was there, bringing them over to San Jose and then bringing in Chicho Arango, Joseph Martinez, some big names there. It'll certainly be exciting to see what they can do and interesting. But let's jump into this match this weekend. We hinted and teased a little bit. LAFC at the weekend, 3:30 p.m. Kickoff on Fox and on 1500 ESPN with Dan Terrar and myself. Looking forward to that. The first game of the MLS regular season. LAFC coming fresh off a 2-1 loss in the first leg of CONCACAF Champions Cup action to Colorado on Tuesday, the second leg of that next Tuesday. So they'll have to keep that in mind, trying to advance from a losing position going into that one. They topped the Western Conference in 2024. Some significant additions today. Cengiz Under, the Turkish winger, coming in and joining them this morning. 66 goals, 46 assists in about 343 games played across a bunch of different teams: Fenerbahce, Roma, Leicester, Marseille. Bunch of outs for them: Ilie Sanchez, Edward Atuesta, Matoush Bagush, down to Mexico, Christian Oliveira, down to Brazil. What do we think of this squad? We talked a little bit about it, how Olivier Giroud fits into that and how he didn't really hit the ground running last year. Felt like they kind of limped across the finish line despite finishing first at the end of the season, thanks to a late goal by Houston. But what do we think of LAFC this season, what they've done this offseason, how that will play out, Manny? I'll start with you.
Well, I think, make no mistake, we're still going to one of the toughest places to get a result in MLS. Great atmosphere, great crowd, great expectations for them to really push the tempo at home and really, kind of not let you breathe when you play there. So I think for me, it's important for Minnesota, for us to kind of take an extension of our preseason form, which is we were very organized, very structured, very compact. We played for large parts of the preseason in this 5-3-2, which, we gave a little space away wide, but when they got into tight spaces, we were very good at winning the ball and getting forward and creating chances with Tani and Yeboah. And then you got Joseph and Bongi kind of getting numbers, and either Sani or Lode or Pereira doing a good job kind of being our number 10. So I think it's really interesting because I'm not sure. This is a new revamped LAFC where they're still getting players in. They're going to have to put some young kids in the field. No doubt about it, this weekend, and we'll see how they do. I mean, the young, fresh legs might help Giroud, might help Bouanga and some of these guys who are very, very dangerous offensively.
John, what are your expectations for LAFC based off what you've seen so far in CONCACAF Champions Cup and what they've done this preseason?
I think LAFC is interesting because I assume they're going to be good. We all assume they're going to be good, and I can't take credit for this. This goes to Matt Doyle, who's an MLS writer, but he put something on social media last night that was something along the lines of LAFC has spent years relentlessly driving out all the creative midfielders from their team, and poof, now they don't have any creativity in the middle of the field. So it'll be interesting to see how they play. It's going to be very interesting to see how Minnesota lines up. Like Manny said, during the preseason games that were broadcast, they were playing 3-5-2 or even a 4-4-2 for a half. But Eric Ramsey was at pains to say, we're just trying stuff. We want to try stuff during the preseason when the games don't matter. So I'm absolutely fascinated for the whistle to go on Saturday and see how is Minnesota playing. Do they believe that this 3-5-2 look is going to work, or 5-3-2 or whatever you want to call it? Do they believe that having two strikers up front is going to work, or are they going to go back to the tried and true one center forward, guys around it? What are the tweaks? What is the tactical stuff for that? I think that'll be really interesting to see from Minnesota on Saturday, especially, as you mentioned, playing at LAFC, which I think statistically is the hardest place in MLS history to go and win.
Yeah, it's certainly difficult. You mentioned, Manny, the CONCACAF Champions Cup will have an effect on this game and how they line up. How much do you think having to come back from Colorado, where they played in 6-degree temperatures with snow blowing around the area, and then they have to turn around next Tuesday and play another game, and they're coming back from a 2-1 deficit, trying to overturn that and move on in CONCACAF Champions Cup action? How much do you think that'll affect the lineup we'll see on Saturday in the season opener? Because you certainly don't want to start your season off with a loss. No one ever wants to do that, but you also don't want to get bounced from CONCACAF Champions Cup action in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even more affects the coaching staff, and particularly Steve Trundle, because he has to manage 3 games in 7 days, and he might tell the press, I'm just going to take it one game at a time, and I'm going to put the best lineup out there. But the reality is he's got a staff. He's got a sports science staff that's going to talk about his younger and older players' minutes. And he's also got to look at that game Tuesday and the level and the quality. Given the conditions, you could argue that limited it. But they didn't look quite on all cylinders. And so he has to think about, was this my best lineup? And is this the best lineup against Minnesota? So for me, I think it massively affects the coaching staff the most, because he is expected to manage 3 games in 7 days and be competitive.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see how LAFC set up on Saturday and what that means, because we've said, when we've talked about how they dominated possession at times last year, but they've slowly, it feels like, been moving towards more of a transition team over the past couple months. And certainly with the moves that they made, getting rid of a lot of their creative midfielders, Mateusz Bagush gone, Edward Atuesta, Elie Sanchez, that was the heart of their midfield last year. And they did a lot of work, and now they're gone. Now they've got Timothy Tillman and Mark Delgado, which is an underrated signing, which I do like that pickup for them, because he certainly helped LA Galaxy last year. Interesting to see players go across that rivalry back and forth. But it'll certainly be interesting to see how those guys set up. How do we think this squad does this year? Because it feels certainly like, as we mentioned, Olivier Giroud at his advanced age of 38 in this league in soccer, it feels like are we starting to see the peak of this squad? Have we seen the peak of this squad, or do you think there's still another leg to go with what LAFC can do with bringing in some of these younger guys? 27-year-old Cengiz Ünder, who's kind of in his prime. We'll see how he transitions into the league. Have we seen the peak of LAFC, or is there still something left there that will be a really difficult team for this league to handle? Man,
I mean, I would look at it like, this is the first time LAFC, I think, since they came to MLS, has had to deal with an expanded level of adversity, because it's not just about competing against the rest of the league. They were reminded that the best team in the history of our league is their neighbor, it's their next door, it's their main rival, it's the LA Galaxy. And so this is the first time where they haven't felt like the number one team in that market for soccer. And, that's the adversity. And they'll have to figure out how to do that in their world. So I think within that context, it'll be really, really interesting to see how the players, the staff, and particularly their fan base, by the way, again, the Galaxy fan base has been through a lot, good and bad and ugly, and has come out this year as champions. So I would still be curious to see how they react, even the fans, to supporting the team this year. I went to the playoff game last year against Seattle, and I thought the fans were a little numb in terms of pushing their team on. Maybe not the supporter section, but the fans in general were like, wait, what is this? We can't play good soccer every game at home. And it almost led to Seattle really taking over the game and stopping any kind of creativity or any kind of chances. And next thing you know, typical Cristiano Ronaldo gets a great goal, which he does every time in his career, and they're out. So I am really curious from a fan standpoint, nothing to do with this weekend, about how LAFC reacts to now that the Galaxy are number one in that market again.
I think that is an underrated storyline for LAFC, John, and that this is, since they came into the league, this really is the first time that they're not the number one team in LA. LA Galaxy have struggled for dang near a decade at this point, and then finally they came back and won the title last year in impressive fashion on their run in the playoffs. But this is the first time LAFC enters the season probably not the number one team in LA, and as Manny pointed out, that's going to be really interesting to see how that team and fan base handle that.
Yeah, I mean, your heart goes out to those Galaxy fans. They went 5 or 6 years without a major trophy. You feel really bad for them.
It's horrible.
It's been rough.
This must be so difficult not winning a title.
Another team signed a major star. I don't know, how did they deal with that? They must have cried into their gold-plated pillows for days and days. But the funny thing about LAFC is they always seem to figure it out. And they're still a reasonably new franchise in the history of the league. But over the past few years, even that one year they missed the playoff because they underperformed their expected totals they got horrible goalkeeping, and they managed to underperform their expected goals by 20 or something, just some ridiculous year where everything came together for them to miss the playoffs. Even after that, they came back and I think won the Western Conference the next year. So if I was an LAFC fan, it would be wrong not to have some confidence in their front office to figure things out a little bit. Just whatever the state of this build might be, I feel like LAFC will get it together at some point. But as we saw last year, that doesn't mean right away at the start of the year. LAFC was not all that great early last year. They got it together and ended up winning the Western Conference. So again, you don't feel bad for them exactly, but certainly early in the season, it's interesting to see what they will look like. Especially they're in a weird spot because this is their home opener, but they also played Tuesday and they got to play again in the middle of next week. So how do you approach that? Like Manny said, how do you approach that as a coaching staff to say we want to put our best foot forward in front of our fans, but also there's a bigger picture at play here?
So you're saying because of the way the roster is in a bit of a flux, the fact that they have another competition they're trying to compete in at the same time, this might be a dang good time to catch LAFC at home in one of the toughest road environments in the league, Manny.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think given where we are and how we played in preseason, and if there was ever a time to go into a very tough opening day game, this feels like it. This feels like we've got a group that I think can deal with high-powered offenses. I think we've got enough experience out there that is ready to kind of like manage an environment like this. We got a lot of good leadership on the field this weekend that I think has been through a lot. So for me, there's no doubt. I think this group is going into this weekend expecting to play really well and compete. And I think if we shift our head to Minnesota United in our own history, this is a big year for us. I mean, we're trying to transition from a team that makes the playoffs to a team that's going to build something to contend for a championship. So I'm incredibly excited about it. I think looking at a couple of the storylines for us this weekend with Minnesota United, if we go with similar to the Tanny Calvin, I'm really excited to see how that plays out. Mm-hmm. If I'm doing a deep dive, first and foremost, probably defensively, how can they help us stay organized, compact? And then when we win balls in good spots, how can they just be hungry to go forward and really punish LAFC if they do open up a bit and throw some numbers forward? So I'm really excited about that. I think the back line should be interesting. Obviously Diaz got the red card last year, so he's out. So who replaces him? The last couple of games, it's been Dugan, a young kid who's done really well in preseason. It looks like Eric is favoring. I think the midfield, you got Pereira, who's had a really good preseason, maybe is more of a central number 10 versus kind of that left centralist number 10 that he kind of played along with Lode last year. So a lot of things there that we start to think about. But ultimately for me, I think the number one that I observed from preseason, we got to be organized and compact. We've got to make sure that we make the spaces really tight so Bouanga can't get his legs going, so they can't allow good service into Giroud. And then I think the game opens up for us. And then I think it is a little bit like what happened to Colorado, where Crowder, wow, we can not only withstand the pressure, we can create chances and get the ball and, create some great set pieces. So really looking forward to the fact that you're right. I think it's a great opportunity for us to get a result there this weekend.
Speaking of Minnesota, John, there's an overwhelming sense of positivity around this team, not just from inside the Minnesota market, nationally as well. A lot of analysts across this league are predicting Minnesota to be fourth, third in the Western Conference, in the upper echelons of the Western Conference. Where do you sit on that? Because Manny and I talked about it last week. We gave our feelings on this squad last week. Where do you sit on what your expectations are for Minnesota this season?
Well, I would have said before this moment right now, I would have said Minnesota, they feel like maybe the best of the non-LA Seattle teams. Like they're sort of the class of the Western Conference. And like Manny said, a big storyline this season is, can Minnesota climb up into that class with LAFC, with the Galaxy, with Seattle? But the way you put it, and that all the positivity and the universal positivity, and I'm from Minnesota, and I'm used to watching Minnesota sports fans.
Don't do it.
I'm so nervous now. This is awful. They're going to finish 15th.
I knew I would trigger him with that.
We're all getting triggered right now.
I can't breathe.
There's too much positivity. What's going on?
They're going to trade for Mike Miller and Randy Foy. This is awful.
Herschel Walker.
Mike Miller.
Yeah, Herschel Walker is going to come in. Why did they trade all those draft picks?
So you're not buying into all the hype because of Minnesota sports fandom and all the hurt that you've experienced in the past.
I was totally buying into the hype until you put it so positively, and now I'm very concerned. Now we don't look right at it. Don't say it out loud. This is not what you want to be doing.
For that. It's too late for saying it out loud.
Is this being recorded? This is bad. This is bad for everybody. Why would we say it?
Can we edit this last 5 minutes out of the podcast?
Edit all traces of positivity out, because you're playing with fire. You're poking the bear.
This is your show, John. You can figure out.
Minnesotans know how this story goes.
There's certainly a lot of this right now who are agreeing with you that we like the positivity. We just don't want to see it right now. We want to see it at the end of the season, not before the season starts. We've been we've been hammered too many times by that particular curse. Manny, speaking of Minnesota once again going into this match, what are the keys for them to come away from LA with 3 points? I know it's shutting down Denny Bouanga, but that's easier said than done. So what do the Loons need to focus on Saturday to be able to come away with 3 points?
Yeah, I mean, I think in all seriousness, the solid collectiveness of the team, I think, is why the national media is really excited about us because we've got some nice depth in position. We're solid. We play like a unit. So I think those things come into play where now it's about the little things. So again, individually and collectively, we have to make sure we are on point with dealing with Giroux, on point with dealing with Bouanga. I think LAFC has some weak spots in the back that we can expose, and Kelvin and Tani, I think, can overwhelm them if they're hungry to, like I said, get forward and win the ball in good spots. Opening day games, I also think set pieces are a big deal. I think that's going to be a big deal for us all year and how we play. I think there's an expectation to raise our level even from where we were last year. We did pretty well, but I think that'll be a big part of the game this weekend, particularly when your first games get a little tight. Those little moments, the little differences mean a lot. So I think set pieces will be a big deal as well.
What are the chances we see any of the new guys this weekend?
It's tough because they're all not had a full preseason and not even close. You're looking at guys who I think Eric has to really think about how he wants to kind of build them up into the season. I mean, it would be really great if we're 4 weeks from the season now. That would be a different discussion about the guys, but because he's still getting to know them, and particularly the last 10 days of preseason, the staff really has to focus on that starting 11 for this first game. So I don't think the staff has gotten enough probably to say, yeah, I'm going to throw these guys in and do it. So I think this game, I don't think there'll be a lot of impact from our new guys. But I think over the next 4 weeks, we're going to have some nice moments to see where they fit in and how they can help us get points and navigate early points in the season.
John, you mentioned Eric experimenting with the lineups during the preseason. Do you think on Saturday, when the whistle blows to start the match, is it a 2-striker system that we see on Saturday, or do you think we go back to what we saw at the end of last season?
I mean, they've worked so much on it in terms of playing two and a half out of the 3 preseason games. The way that people talk about it, the way that Will Trapp talked about it after training on Tuesday, made me think that maybe that is the plan. But of course, nobody's going to tip their hand and say, "Oh yeah, we're definitely playing 2 up front. Get ready. Go watch all our preseason tapes." So you really have to read way between the lines, so far in between the lines that maybe you're just convincing yourself of stuff that's not there. So I don't know, but they certainly were determined to work on it a little bit and find a way to try to make it work during the preseason. And as much as anything, one of the things that I asked Ramsey about was the sort of tactical maturity of this group. And so I think you could see them going back and forth, or playing something for 30 minutes and something for another 30 minutes, then making some subs and going to a third thing perhaps. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that they're just gonna line it up and roll it out, and if it's not working, that's what they're gonna stick with forever. But certainly that might be what they start with on Saturday.
Yeah, I think John's bringing a good point. I think particularly for a team like us to get into that top echelon, versatility is going to have to be part of our club. We're going to have to be able to kind of play multiple systems, but not even game to game sometimes, but maybe within the game a lot to have the staff manage the game to get results. So again, that's where I like the level of maturity of this team, along with kind of some balance. I think when you're solid and you're collective like this, you can be versatile with your systems within a game and within week to week as well.
You guys want to make some predictions?
League predictions.
Are you gonna give us topics, or are we just gonna make random predictions?
You're gonna make random predictions. I'm gonna tell you to make random predictions. No.
Okay, USA over Canada. Okay, in hockey. How about that one? Does that count?
Sure. Okay. Just random sports predictions. Who wins the Supporters Shield and why? And I'm gonna make one change to this note on the rundown. You can't pick Miami. Taking Miami out of this choice. You got to pick someone else.
All right, then I pick Seattle.
Why?
Because I mean,
Team USA has reassembled.
Yeah, that's right. Because I don't want to say anything good about Canada on a USA Canada game day. No, I mean, I think Seattle is the team with the fewest questions in the Western Conference, and Miami, obviously, for a lot of reasons, is the natural pick. Not only did they win it last year, but they have a lot going for them. But if you look at the team that maybe, like we say, has the most flexibility, has the fewest questions overall about their roster, I feel like Seattle is the safest pick.
Manny?
I mean, that's a really extreme position, John, in that like safe doesn't actually mean that they're. I would be curious to see like what the Vegas odds are in Seattle because I think that you act like that's a normal pick. My brain is like I don't think a lot of pundits are picking Seattle to be the supporter.
Interesting.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. You're in that world more than me. So, but
I mean, you make a good point that this is MLS, so maybe the safe pick would be Toronto or San Jose or somebody.
I mean, again, it's really hard for you guys to put me in this position where, as a club and culture, it's Minnesota first always. Okay, that's the big one.
Just pick Minnesota, Manny. Just do it.
Second is Miami, but that can't be picked.
Nope.
I still think the East is the stronger conference, so I'm going to go with Atlanta then.
I like Atlanta. That's an out of the park pick. I feel with how they finished last season, 9th, sneaking in, and then I mean they did upset Miami in the playoffs, so I like that one. I think I'm going to go. I don't want to agree on this show, but I think it's either between Seattle or Cincinnati for me. For who I think will win the Supporter Shield if I can't pick Miami based off my own rules. I just like what they've. As you said, John, I like what Seattle's done this offseason. It feels like they're a cohesive unit already from what we saw last night. Granted, CONCACAF Champions Cup action, so you can't really know how that's going to translate over to MLS action. But with what they did and how they finished last season and how what they added this offseason, I feel like they're one of the better teams coming into this season. All right, now a tougher question, putting you guys on the spot. Wooden Spoon, who's winning it this year? I don't know if you win the Wooden Spoon, but who's winning it?
Can we pick Toronto, or is that off the table just like
you
picking
can pick
Miami?
Toronto if you want.
Oh, I feel, it's funny you say that the East is the stronger conference, Manny, because I feel like all the contenders for the Wooden Spoon are also in the East. Maybe because the top teams are better, and so the bottom teams look like they're further behind. I mean, Toronto, you got Insigne who doesn't want to be there. You got Federico Bernardeschi who, towards the end of last season, maybe in their last game last season, intentionally got himself sent off and then booted the ball into the stands. And that's Toronto's two best players. So it's hard not to pick Toronto for the Wooden Spoon.
Manny?
I got to spice things up with that. I got to stick in the East. Let's go DC.
Yeah.
Oh, DC.
I feel like they're the other contender.
I'm surprised San Diego doesn't get a mention here. I mean, I know they spent a lot of money on their roster, but it is a new team.
After St. Louis the other year, I'm not picking an expansion team to finish last.
That's fair.
Burn forever on expansion teams.
St. Louis kind of ruined the expansion team expectation for everybody. Good luck, San Diego, trying to live up to that.
Yeah. Well, I take it back. San Diego's winning the Supporter Shield for sure.
By the way, the whole Miami thing, I just bring it up. Like, Messi was really good again last night. Like, he looks fitter this year than last year. And it's that
impressive. Goal was pretty dang good.
Really good, and he looked efficient with his touches. Like I said, he looks much more active this year than last year. So the fact that he's like, "Yep, I'm playing in 6 below wind chill, feels like weather," that's a dangerous place for a lot of teams in the East and the league as well.
He's got Alan Rickman's haircut from the Harry Potter movies as Severus Snape ready to go. Yeah. Just he's ready to take over. It
did get me excited about May 10th, guys, by the way. I can't help it. Every time I watch right now, I think about May 10th because
there are Loons marketing and ticket staff in Manny's office right now, pointing a weapon at him.
Yeah.
Mention May 10th. Mention it.
Which team that missed the playoffs last year is making the playoffs this season? Do you want me to list the teams so you know them, or do you guys have that?
I got mine already.
Okay. All right.
Oh, is it all the teams or just
whichever? No, which team? Just name one team that missed the playoffs last year that you think is going to make the playoffs this year.
This is easy. You just do it every year. It's the Fire.
That's fair.
And every year they break your heart. So. Yeah.
Oh man, that probably is a good pick, but I can't in good conscience pick the Chicago Fire to do well because it doesn't seem right. Like they're the
no matter what they do, it just
doesn't
work out for them.
That's right. They hired Berhalter. They got rid of Shaqiri. There's all these guys that they're finally acting like a normal franchise, and something's got to go wrong for them, don't you think?
Along similar
Um,
line. Yeah, go ahead, mate. Go ahead, John.
how do we feel about Kansas City? Are we
Ooh.
optimistic or pessimistic about Kansas City getting it together this year?
I don't know. I don't know how to feel about Kansas City.
I mean, apart from the, whatever Minnesota versus Kansas City, I just watching them last night, I couldn't quite decide like, is this a good team? Is this not a good team? Is this a team that has three players, all of whom either play winger or striker and no one
Yeah.
else? Or are they more solid than you give them credit for from the goal out? Do they have a goalkeeper that can play this year? Is Tim Melia under the age of 50? Who is older, Tim Melia or Stephen Fry?
Are they the same age?
I looked it up last night. Stephen Fry is only 38, which seems very young for Stephen Fry because he's been an old, crusty guy for at least a dozen years now.
At least.
I think the Joveljic signing's interesting, but I don't know how it fits with the rest of the squad. I'm not too confident about Sporting Kansas City, but we say that every year, and then most of the time, Peter Vermeers just ekes out a playoff team out of them.
Yeah, I
It's
think
hard
he
to
makes
tell.
them better. But to your point, how did he make them better, and how does that make the rest of the group better? They're in an interesting situation. It's a big year for Kansas City because it has been a tough couple of years, I think, to show that they're in the top of the West. So the other
I'm
one
gonna.
for we talked about the story of coaches. I think that's a big deal. I'm really excited to see how Eric Will does in Dallas. It's a former team of mine, a lot younger. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this young kid, but he's worked really hard. The Luciano Costa trade helps, but they still seem like a roster in progress.
They had a lot of offseason moves this
Yeah, a lot
winter.
out, a lot
Yeah,
out. So it'll be interesting to see who they put around him to kind of make them do well. I think I mentioned the Austin with Nico Estevez there now, the former Dallas coach. It's really interesting. Like I said, the West to me is more wide open than the East personally, which is I think exciting for us because I think that's why we're probably one of the favorites in the top four is because there's a lot of uncertainty about a lot of the clubs.
for sure.
St. Louis could be a lot better this year too. They seem like they have a chance to rebound a little bit from the disaster that was the first half of last year, and then getting things together a little bit down the stretch.
And I know we kind of mentioned the Galaxy, but really, I don't know if our fans here know that Pansel's out until probably May-ish, I think, at least 3 months. Puig is out at least till August, although I still think ACLs, it's really takes the following year for you to really be back. Particularly his body type, it's not lends to having skinny legs like I do. I know that it takes a little longer to recover knee injuries. So, but I do think that'll be fascinating how LA does and how they keep now competitive with a couple big players out at least half a year. Interesting, yeah. I'm excited. Like I said, this is the West to me is wide open, and we're right in the thick of it, which gets me even more excited.
I think it's intriguing how LA Galaxy are going to handle all the players that they're missing from that championship roster and how they're going to handle all the expectations that are going to be put upon or that are put upon them this season after winning the title last year. Plenty to discuss coming up later this season, all season long, right here on the Matchday preview. Guys, it's been super fun talking to you. Tune in this Saturday, Fox Deportes MLS Season Pass, 3:30 p.m. Central Time for the season opener, the MLS season opener, not just Minnesota United season opener, the entire league's season opener. It's Minnesota United take on LAFC. That one also on 1500 ESPN with Dan Terrar, myself, pre-match starting at 3 p.m. for that one. Looking forward to it. Plenty coming up this next week as we gear up for the home opener next weekend against Montreal. Season opener watch party on Saturday. Join the club at Brits Pub for the season opening match against LAFC. We'll be there from 2 p.m. through the end of the game with plenty of giveaways while supplies last. Kickoff scheduled for 3:30 p.m. Central Time, as I said, but come early, make the most of the watch party. You got the Soul Bowl player appearance on Tuesday, bringing some special guests to Soul Bowl on Tuesday, February 25th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Stop by and meet a couple of the guys. Food drive with Keystone on Wednesday. Swing by Lot C at Allianz Field between 4:30 and 6 as we partner with Keystone Community Services for a food drive plus MNUFC giveaways, bring some donations and help us reach our goal of 301 pounds in honor of the home opener on March 1st, excuse me. And then the Bangers Only Ball on Thursday. We're going back to First Avenue for the 3rd annual Bangers Only Ball, featuring Twin Cities based artists Polisa and Papa Mbai. Come kick off the season with a few songs and music there. Guys, plenty coming up ahead of that home opener next Saturday. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to talking to you guys next weekend. Or next week.
It'll be a fun one. Let's get after it this weekend.
Looking forward to it. Loons fans, thanks for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Matchday Preview. Thanks again to the production staff, Grace Dearson, Evan Entler, and Kyle Hayward for putting this on every week, and we'll talk to you next week.